Weam Namou, Executive Director of the Chaldean Cultural Center, is joining us now on the Oakland County MegaCast. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
How has this been for you and members of your organization? Hard to navigate?
Originally, yes, we were kind of just very confused, like everybody else. We were still working at the office when it got to the point where our chairperson said, you know what, it's really time to go home and be safe. But they said, continue working because we wanted to continue a lot of our programming, which we started thinking of what we can do with them, whether we do it through virtual online programs. And I got to tell you, there was a couple of organizations that were very helpful in this process. One which was Culture Source. So the executive director, Omari Rush, he was just great because the first thing he did is he just said this, we're going to have CEO meetings weekly to help through the process. And then we felt like, okay, we're not so alone. And then you heard stories where people were really maybe even doing worse, where they had to shut down pretty quickly, whereas we maintained, we closed because of the quarantine, but we continued to work. So it was really important to have that kind of community support. So
your cultural center offers such an important service to the community, but for people that haven't been there and aren't familiar with what you do, can you tell us about the center?
Yeah, well, the beautiful thing about the center was founded in 2003. But early on, what they decided to do is create a museum in order to help preserve the history and the culture of the Chaldean people. Now, most people are, well, especially outside of Michigan, but in Michigan, a lot of people are getting acquainted with who Chaldeans are. But there's such an incredible history to these people that dates over 5,000 years ago. And they that's where the cradle of civilization started in Mesopotamia. I think there's sometimes a disconnect from that region because the name was later changed to Iraq in 1921 when the British occupied that region and they changed the name. And so it wasn't until 2003 that people started making the connection of where Iraq really is. It was due to the war that they started becoming more familiar with that region and that it holds such a rich history that unfortunately is overlapped by all the things that happened, the wars, the violence that takes place there, and that seems to be the focus. However, the Chaldean Cultural Center focuses on the beauty and the history and the magnificent history and heritage and culture of that region.
So, like you said, a lot of people outside of Michigan, they are not familiar with Chaldean and the Chaldean culture. How did Michigan become such an attraction for Chaldeans?
Well, originally, the Chaldeans started coming to Michigan because of for job opportunities, for economic purposes. They also felt comfortable that there was already a community here that was the Syrian and the Lebanese community, and they had couple of things in common, including the language. They both spoke Arabic, so they can understand each other. And so this was part of the attraction because we're very tribal in a sense that we have extended families and we kind of like it's very hard, the language barrier. So that was one of the reasons. And then the Ford plant was offering that $5 a day, which was very lucrative. So initially that was the reason. The reasons changed over time due to wars and then the Chaldeans going through a lot of persecutions and even as recent as 2014 massacres. Naturally, they came to where their families are, which that was how I immigrated here in 1981 because my brother petitioned us. He already lived here and had a family here, and he petitioned us to come.
Weam Namou with us. She is the executive director of the Chaldean Cultural Center with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. And Weam, earlier you had mentioned how the Chaldean Cultural Center is preserving all that great, rich history of Mesopotamia, of that region that's now known as Iraq, that has so much connection to the history of a lot of what we use today, such as writing, such as the battery, even beer to an extent has
Yes.
has a background in Mesopotamia. Talk about some of the history and those connections that we're able to experience at the Chaldean Cultural Center and Museum.
Well, okay, so what I keep finding out, including from somebody who is a writer about Aramaic, we had a visitor yesterday from California who came just to see our community because he's writing a book to preserve the Aramaic and Chaldean heritage and language. So what he found out that he didn't know was that the first recorded writer in history is Enheduanna, a woman from ancient Iraq. She was the daughter of Sargon. He was a king. And she basically, the reason she is considered the first writer in history, it's not because she was the first to write anything, because there was writings before then, but she decided to make history by signing her name at the end of the poetry. And in her poems, she would write, "It is I, Enheduanna, who wrote this." Most people are not familiar with this. This is the first writer in recorded history, not male or female, just the first writer who decided to sign her name. And she was a very powerful woman in that region. So that's one thing that I have discovered very few people know, including people in our community, because one of the things that we did not grow up in a society where we could learn about our heritage and our language. We were oppressed in that sense, and you can't learn anything past 1400 years ago. And so we discovered who we are here in the United States, particularly in Michigan, which has the highest concentration of Chaldeans. Before, it was said to be the second highest to Iraq. But that's not really the case anymore because of all that has happened there. Another interesting fact is that beer, the first recipe of beer was found in ancient Mesopotamia. And there was a goddess goddess Ninkasi, she was the goddess of beer. And she had a certain recipe where she had the priestesses do a fresh brew of beer every single day because it was considered healthier to drink beer than some of the water that was available to them.
The history is so fascinating, and I love how your face is lighting up sharing these stories. So is the Cultural Center open now, and how does that work? Can people make appointments to come visit?
Yeah, so I saw from the earlier person that you interviewed where she said they were, in some cases, getting more people because things are becoming virtual online. So we have experienced something similar where more people are visiting the museum. So I guess, now the museums are becoming like more of a fun thing to do because there's less things going on. But all people have to do is really just call. And our phone number is 248-681-5050. And they can just call and make a reservation. And we'd happy to accommodate with the times. We're available Monday through Saturday. The museum is open. And it's just really through reservation just because of just to keep everybody safe. And it's limited to 10 people, a group of 10 people.
So, Weam, where can people find more information about what is at the Chaldean Cultural Center, about the museum, or to be able to schedule those visits up to 10 people at a time?
Well, all I have to do is visit our website. I'm going to spell the word Chaldean. Everybody knows Cultural Center. So it's Chaldean, Chaldean, ChaldeanCulturalCenter.org. And we have all our information there. We also have a wonderful video that kind of gives you a glimpse of what that museum looks like.
So what's it been like for you to be able to reopen? Are you guys able to get the supplies that you need? Do people need to wear a mask? How does that look right now?
Yeah, so we will provide masks if people forget. Usually people have been really, I think they've been very respectful of the regulations that are going on. And we haven't had any issues with that. And people just come in with masks. Again, like the thing that has really switched for us is that how can we stay relevant during this time? And it's through people like U of M Detroit. We've collaborated with them. For instance, today we have a lecture series that now we started, which they helped train us on how to do that. And once a week, we interview somebody, whether it's an author, an artist, and that keeps us relevant. It also allows us to reach people that we otherwise might not have been able to reach. For instance, last week or 2 weeks ago, our guest was an artist, a very famous artist and writer of a Mesopotamian background, and he lives in California. And I think before, it seems like the difference is we would have when I was in contact with him, I'm like, oh, whenever you're in town, let us know. We'll do a book signing or something like that. And of course, that's wonderful. And that's something that we will do in the future again, once things go back to normal. But in the meantime, we have found communities that really try to see, like, how can we help each other? For the U of M Detroit Center, if it was them that, when they offer to help and they train us and they go online with us so we don't screw things up. And that's just wonderful. Even what you're doing right now is just a really wonderful service. So it's kind of just trying to see, like, how can we stay relevant and continue to provide the services. And also, like I said, our heritage and our language, we were on the verge of extinction if it wasn't for having a home here in Michigan. And the second largest community is in San Diego. And so we're very, very fortunate that we can keep this culture alive through these opportunities.
So the lecture series, they're virtual, and are they open to the general public?
Yes, they are. And so if we have a Facebook page, and if you go to the find us at Chaldean Cultural Center, you will find our upcoming events. You can sign up for them. What we do is, we have it on Zoom initially, and then we post it up live.
Weam Namou with us. She is the executive director of the Chaldean Cultural Center with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And so much changes have been made to programming at museums all throughout the local area, all throughout the country, with these virtual programs coming into play due to the pandemic. After the pandemic passes and you go back to normal operations, will these kinds of mitigation tactics that have been used to continue programming during the pandemic remain in place maybe even after this is passed?
Yeah, because some of them we view it as opportunities. What has happened to the minorities in Iraq is they're now all over the place. And we don't even know really who lives in what countries, and we're trying kind of to bridge all of that and bring them together. And we feel like online virtual events can help do that, where they can feel connected, they can see their identity somewhere. They've gone through a lot of trauma, and their identities are really that they've lost connection with that. Before this, we did a mobile museum where we would go to the schools and do a presentation about the Chaldeans. And the Chaldean little kids would see themselves on that screen, and their face would light up. And the non-Chaldeans would feel like, oh, this is so informative. I did not know that about my friend, about my neighbor. So it's just really is getting to know a group that's just kind of like the Native Americans that has a history. It's the indigenous people of Iraq. And we have something to say and to provide, and we have the opportunity here to have a voice to do that. The internet is great for opportunities like that. However, nothing also replaces in-person meetings and tours and book signings.
What I love is you were saying about the cultural center with the kids and allowing for kids to see that, when we see people that look like us, then we don't feel so alone. So being able to teach young kids about different cultures expands their horizons. So for people who aren't familiar with Chaldeans, what do you want them to know?
Well, most people know, the people in Michigan know us to be Christians and that we're a very faith-based community, and that is very true. However, there's a history that dates back long before that, and we contributed a great deal to society. As I said, some of the inventions that were made there. So I think to just see us as that and not kind of just see, okay, these are the Christian Iraqis, but there's a lot more to us than that. And also that sometimes we are misunderstood because of the fact that we have gone through so much oppression and persecution and massacres. So sometimes we seem like we're in a little bubble, and it has to do with where we came from. It's a lot of trauma, and the difference between us and other communities that are here is that the other communities have been here longer. And so they have been able to evolve out of the survival mode to more cultural and expression and the very healthy aspects of society. We're kind of in that phase still where we're trying to heal from the traumas and to kind of get out of the survival mode, because sometimes people don't even remember that we don't need to be in that survival mode anymore.
You're a beautiful community. We have a lot of Chaldeans that live in my subdivision, and you're very, very close-knit. And that's what's so great about it is you pick each other up and everyone lifts one another and coming together, and not just with their fellow Chaldeans, but with all of our neighborhood too as well. So real quickly before we let you go, do you want to let people know where you're located, so that it's just easier for them to find you?
Yes, so we're in West Bloomfield, 5600 Walnut Lake. And so that's where they can go for the museum. And we are trying to also expand programming in other areas so we can reach people in Sterling Heights. Again, there's a large population in Sterling Heights, and even Detroit. I mean, we would like to expand so that we understand that it's not sometimes very easy to get to the museum. So if you can't get there, we're going to find a way to get to you.
Well, that is awesome. You and everyone take the time to visit their website. A lot of great programs and great lecturers coming on to explain your culture as well. Thank you so much for being with us on the Oakland County
Thank you so much
MegaCast.
for having me. This was fun. Thank you.